I've really enjoyed reading the experiences. Thanks for putting the record button on it.
I goofed.
I've really enjoyed reading your experiences, seeing some of the art that's been coming in. And so I'd like to, again, before we really get started, to encourage you to write me, to connect, to share some of your stories and your interests and experiences, anything around what we're calling the homework assignments. And that's DMtx at medicinalmindfulness.org. So one of the reasons we're doing this webinar is to get feedback from you all. We could have made this very private and not talked about it extensively with the larger community. And I'm a community organizer and I'm an activist, and I want to share what we're doing with everyone, and also to make sure that it feels as much in alignment as we can make it with the community that we want to represent. So again, this is an opportunity for us to connect. So again, thanks for playing with us. It's been very interesting, to say the least, already. Also, it's given me an opportunity. I'm going to share a screen with you soon here. It's given me an opportunity to spend some time developing something that is fun and important and creative. And let me see if I can get the chat. I thought I could get the chat on. Is there a way to get the chat when I'm doing the full screen, Kyle? Or am I just not going to see it?
You have to, I think, like exit your full screen share and then pull up the chat. I'm not too sure. I haven't played around with the screen share while doing the chat before.
All right. I'll try to figure out another time when we're not in session. So keep an eye on what people are saying. So if there's any questions, I can address it. Hold on. I got to move this. All right. Pardon that little delay. All right. So I've got a couple hours with you. Then we're going to take a week break so I can recover from all of this. And then we'll do another couple of events. Tonight, we want to review, see if there's any questions around the DMTX overview that we discussed, and then also the body scan. And then I want to put this into as large of a context as I can, because it makes the psychonaut criteria make a little more sense. The importance of integration, and what the medicine path is really about. And then I sent you all the criteria as I've written them so far, and I would love to hear feedback, and I'll go over that. And then we're going to go into discussing more in-depth mindfulness practices that help us develop those skill sets that I was describing, and those capacities that we all have inside of us. I have an update on this image. I'm really excited about this, the creative sci-fi aspect of this work. So here's the next draft of the poster that we're doing, and I've sent in a little bit of feedback. I requested that one of the sitters look more feminine, and then the next one's probably going to be the complete form. I'm super excited about that. Just to name two, that we're really trying to be mindful of languaging and definitions and things. So Extended-State DMT is up there, and it should be hyphenated. So I've already let the artist know there. So the proper term for what we're doing is Extended-State DMT research, with a hyphen between extended and state. Just a quick overview. Half of this conversation tonight is going to be on this concept of skill development and preparing for these big psychedelic experiences. And I'm also going to be speaking of the mindset of the psychonauts as relevant, and also the setting, like the global setting, why it's important. So we're going to be really delving into this again. And the other piece I want to remind everyone of is that medicinal mindfulness works from a holistic paradigm, in which we try to bring in the different orientations that people work from in psychedelic and with psychedelics. This is kind of based on Native American and esoteric teachings, in the four cardinal directions. Religious in the East and psychological in the West, scientific problem solving, creative problem solving in the North, and then creativity, play, art, activism in the South. Why I'm bringing this up again is because there are qualities associated with each, positive qualities associated with each, but also difficult or negative qualities associated with each of these orientations. And some of them may make a lot of sense. So if you take the South, for example, creativity, joy, play, this is where the world of recreational use often lives in. And then so the negative aspect of that is unsafe or overuse, taking too much at festivals or not integrating experiences or simply just taking too much or mixing them, things like that. But if you balance it with its opposite, what we call the North, the scientific, the knowledge-based, that this is where harm reduction models come in, and conversations around safety and things. So the North and the South balance each other out. And in the North, a negative quality would be like over ego, too strong of an ego, rigidity, narcissism, things like that. And that the creativity, joy, and not taking things so seriously in the South helps clear that. And the same with the East and West orientations. That the awareness and connection of the East, of the spiritual work is really amazing and inspiring and extraordinary, and that it is possible though to try to meditate your problems away and not address things that get swept under the rug. And we see this sometimes happen with people who who want to escape this world, or feel like they no longer belong here, because of their medicine use. And that is balanced out by doing psychological depth work and healing trauma and things in the West. The overwhelm in the West, if you're always in the West doing psychological depth healing work, it's like being constantly in the dredges, in deep parts of the soul and psyche for healing. Sometimes it's good to lift your head up out of the muck and remind yourself that you're part of something profound and sacred and bigger than us. So this is embedded in our program, and I'll probably keep coming back to this. And there are actually mindfulness practices associated with the directions as well. So that's why we work holistically, is attempting to bring in balance to a really complex and sometimes difficult to contain experience. So I want to start the conversation around the psychonaut criteria and the assessments. To me, and I also want to play around with this idea of the kind of the sci-fi symbolism of this. So like the DMT psychonauts are in a way the away team, the team that goes out and explores the deep areas and then reports back. And so we want people to be able to just have some skill sets in their capacity to engage these experiences and to report back. And the answer, some of I've been sitting with, well, why do we want this? Why do we want this level of skill set and depth? And the answer is, I'm not 100% sure yet. It's just, I feel like we should prepare our best for something that we don't actually know what we're going to encounter yet, and so I'm really excited to share these ideas with you. I have some notes here I want to really go over though. So I did a speech, so I think it's one of my better ones, when we had Dennis McKenna come. So if you get on YouTube and Google psychedelic shine and cyber DMT, this is a really good presentation on exploring like the stress of engaging deep, intense expeditions in the psychedelic realm. And there's the only analogy I can imagine is like people going to Mars to colonize Mars, as and to be in an area extended in like a high stress situation for an extended period of time, and so we're preparing for not just one trip or to do this with friends or anything. We really want to create a container that is sustainable over a very long period of time. And to do that, we have to acknowledge that this is dangerous work. But just as space travel is dangerous, or getting on a sailing ship is dangerous, or jumping out of an airplane with a parachute is dangerous. It doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but it's important to acknowledge this danger so that we can best address it. I have a background in counseling, and I don't identify professionally as a counselor anymore because I do work with cannabis, and that wasn't an edge I was really interested in pushing. But I do work with a lot of people as a coach who have used psychedelics, and some of them have really struggled after these experiences, and have been injured by these experiences, and even sometimes in safe and contained settings, And so there's really no immunity that a skilled psychonaut can gain to be immune from difficult experiences, and some of which might have long-term consequences. So we want to really point that out. Just the experience itself, the DMtx experience is pushing DMT to another level, right? An extended state level. That is in and of itself is going to be a complex experience. But we're also within a global context that this work could get public quickly. In some ways it has already. And then also, getting hit by misunderstanding, difficulties from society. I mean, I want to do a project that's actually not legal in this country, right? So the DMT Psychonauts plus the team itself are going to require a strong sense of resiliency and capacity to engage it. There's a podcast that just came out by a local therapist named Keith Kurlander, and it's like How Psychedelics Nearly Killed Me, but ultimately saved my life. I would encourage everybody to listen to this podcast and check it out. I was really impressed by it, and it was a real honest assessment of some of the difficulties that psychedelics can induce in people. And from his perception and mine as well, as that 90+% of it is trauma related, or trauma related in uncontained or unskillful settings, So we take this piece very seriously, and not only for the safety of the psychonaut, which is pretty paramount, right? But also the safety of the team and the safety of and the sustainability of the program. I think I mentioned the safety self-assessment last time. This is a real simple 2-page questionnaire that people can check out if they're curious to see, if they might be have any red flags in regards to being a candidate for a program like this. And we'll talk a little bit about the core criteria that I've been playing with and working on. Let's see. I can't get the questions. So to me, go ahead.
I was going to say, if anything pops up, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this image I talk about in another presentation, but I wanted to bring it back up. And for me, there is a primary polarity in medicine work, and that is we're not just in the medicine experience all the time, but we do take these experiences in, right, and let them affect our lives, our physical lives in the world. And so there's an inner external polarity that really seems to me is the path forward, because I can only move so far in the psychedelic experience if I don't have more content or life experience to engage in that space. And then staying in the material all the time, it can be a mind-numbing experience for some of us. We need creativity, we need novelty and adventure in our lives. But instead of thinking of a one or the other, a medicine path where you're doing psychedelic journey work only, or just living your life, so left or right path, instead you want to think of it as moving between the two, and that is the safest piece, that that we can do is integrate these experiences and transform our lives from them, you know. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this process is part of a really complex environment. And we don't have to talk about like DMT space or anything like that, but just societal environments, life, other players, competing visions, obstacles to this work is going to be part of this experience. And so one way we use the medicine work is to gain clarity and insights into how to engage the material world. And we also use the medicine experiences to heal trauma that we and clear difficult experiences that we pick up in this world. You know, so this is kind of the path ahead, that we are going to be pushing up against some edges, exploring things that not many people have, and definitely not in a way that people have explored before. And so again, assessment and training is going to be really important in this process. So part of our assessment strategy will be looking at how you are in your day-to-day life. And you have to remember that we're exploring these edges of giftedness, not just average or healthy volunteers, but skilled and developed practitioners who at least know how to address things, you know, that we would consider like kinks in their system, or things that, you know, are difficulties in life, you know, personality and traits and things. And that these are some of the qualities that we're looking for. So how do we do this? And so let's go through the criteria, and this will be an area, if there's any questions about specific criteria of the 8, you know, maybe Kyle, we can address them in each one, you know, but I won't read these, but what we're looking for is just simply somebody who has some endurance, you know, some good heart health, because I think this will definitely tax the heart some. And then no serious physical contraindications, which basically just means, you know, the person's generally healthy and fit. And also neurological health. You know, we're going to be doing some brain scan imaging and things as part of the assessment process, and a capacity to change your brain states, you know. People who have advanced practices, yoga, martial arts, dance, and breath work would be good candidates for this. This is one of my favorite pictures from Spies Like Us, which I thought was appropriate. Bunch of psychonauts doing big, crazy work. Psychological health is obviously, this is like the thing that most researchers are looking at. You know, what criteria do people meet for clinical diagnoses? You know, sometimes they're looking for specific diagnoses to work with, like PTSD or anxiety, things of that nature. But we're not really looking at this initial project of healing clinical disorders. But on top of that, you know, like capacities of psychonauts, like strong affect tolerance, ability to tolerate extreme emotions. Uncertainty tolerance means not, you know, being okay and not being overwhelmed by not knowing how something's going to turn out. And then also a healthy ego function. You know, you can't, you know, we require an ego to function in the world. And that these medicines are naturally ego annihilating. So that's something that we want to pay attention to. Part of the waking up process is part of waking up to hard material to look at, you know, so a capacity to engage that material. And then imagination is extremely important because it creates an ability to describe back what the experience is like. So, you know, instead of seeing a blob or, you know, like a color, you know, somebody with a stronger capacity to imagine would be able to describe, you know, that blob in a specific geometric form, you know, and or the entities more clearly, right? And so imagination is probably one of the more important pieces here. And the point of this is not to exclude the psychedelic community, but to engage where we're at and to work with people that are ready for this work. And so if there's traumas involved, part of what we're going to talk about in class 3 is, you know, trauma resolution strategies, because previous difficult experiences are one of the biggest factors that lead to hard trips. And then here, yeah, go ahead.
There is a question that I wanted to just ask before we go on to the next one. Brain scans, CT or MRI, or any other type of scans that you guys are
primarily, and because that's the least intrusive that we're looking at, and so that's going to be actually part of the breathing. I forget the name of it. If Debbie's online, she can tell us. The breathing instruments to teach people how to breathe appropriately, with depth and skill, and that allows us to change brain states. And so that'll be part of the training and also part of the assessment. And then brainwave activity, teaching people through biofeedback and neurofeedback how to alter their brainwave frequencies and their brain states. So having some flexibility and capacity to change your mind state basically is going to be something that we're going to be really looking at here. So this page was written by one of the clinicians on the team who has research experience with psychedelics. And so these are pretty common things that researchers would be looking at. We're wondering how people would respond to having a minimum age requirement of 30 years. Again, having a little more maturity and depth, in our experience might help. But I also know that there's a lot of young people interested in this work. But I think instead of reading all of this, basically this is like excluding everybody, but basically, everybody with any sort of issue, and that's pretty strong. But the transpersonal perspective does allow for hold on, we got a late caller. I want to get him on. It does allow for acknowledging a difference between a clinical diagnosis. Original link.
Yeah, I have some questions here too.
Yeah, it does. So the transpersonal perspective allows for a differentiation between clinical disorders and spiritual awakening processes that could be misdiagnosed by other people, other clinicians as clinical disorders, like psychosis versus religious experience, and bipolar can sometimes come into play with trauma and incomplete processes around psychedelics. What are you? And so our goal would be, even if you have been diagnosed in the past, there would be a reassessment of that within a transpersonal paradigm. So I wanted to name that specifically for people to not think, oh, I can't do this because of this list. But I do want to point out that this is what researchers would be seriously looking at. Kyle, did you have a question?
Yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah. Lindsay asks, can you speak more about how you assess for healthy ego development?
Yeah, that would be not just in the person, but how do they function in the world? How do they engage relationships? How do they engage complex and difficult experiences? Do you have good employment? Are you satisfied with your life? Do you do things out in the world? And so it would be, how do you show up in your presentation? Can you, and then basic stuff, like if you want to look at on the edge of clinical, can you speak coherently? Personality disorder traits would probably be something that we would be looking at, and so those are pointing to splits and breaks and difficulties with ego functioning, so I hope that answers your question for this. But
cool. What do you mean by lifetime on this assessment criteria?
Yeah, have you ever had it current or lifetime psychotic disorders, any time in your past? This is, again, what I'm saying, this was written by somebody other than me. So if somebody has ever been diagnosed with PTSD, even if it was 10, 20 years ago, would that disqualify them from the experience? And personally, like there's going to be these are going to be things that we're going to have to really address and get into the details during the protocol development. And that's, those are some pretty big conversations.
Awesome. And then, there's one more. Are you planning on collecting the data? It would be pretty interesting to see if there's any correlation between events and the brain waves, heartbeat, etc.
Yeah, everything's going to be recorded, for future use. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so one theory that I don't know if this is possible, but using biofeedback, recording the brainwave activity of somebody in an extended state DMT experience, and then using biofeedback technology, can you train somebody to re-enter that state through biofeedback without the DMT? And that's kind of a side project for one of our researchers. I don't know. It's a pretty intense experience, so I don't know if that's possible, but maybe there's like some sort of state that can be accessed that way. So this is an interesting one, in alignment with core community values. I think I just want to point out that we are a transpersonal orientation, we're open, psychedelic community. Realistically, somebody's probably going to be holding space and with meditation and prayer during these experiences. It'll be in a sacred setting, because that's our orientation. It's not going to be necessarily like laboratory or clinical, so if that's not in alignment with something that you're okay with, then this might not be the type of research for you. And then, is there evidence of long-term healthy relationships? Is there a capacity for conflict resolution, healthy systems approaches, and then creative expression in art, movement, dance, creativity, music, so this is about the sustainability of the whole program on this one. Spiritual health, so this is, I think this is like, well, who's defining spiritual? I don't know the term for, this, maybe there's better words for this, but what happens in psychedelic experiences, but, we need a capacity to let go and surrender to awe and wonderment, as well as difficulties. And also what does it mean to have a mature and open worldview, a capacity to believe, but also to doubt, we want people who are open to the possibility that this is pointed as something complex and beyond us, but also to, like, if we have big experiences, also to acknowledge, to have a ground and say, yeah, that was an amazing experience and I'm here now, I have some ground. Energetic body resilience is probably maybe a controversial statement. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the concept of the light body a little later. But at the very least, it's a phenomenologically real experience to engage what appears to be energetic body, energy running through the body, that sort of thing. It's not uncommon at all. And at the very least, symbolically, it provides important information. And my experience is people who have developed resiliencies, energy, body resiliencies, like say through Kundalini yoga or something like that, can maintain a strong charge and a big experience for longer than people who don't have these practices. The capacity to stay focused, right, instead of just flipping the channel over and over again, right? Like, so again, like the clinical side would be ADD or something like that, and then like extreme focus, like Zen meditation would be something that people could develop. Dr. Strassman is a Zen practitioner. Resilience, the capacity to navigate, like what is it, to be able to move in these inner spaces is a skill set that people can develop. And I'm talking about that later. A capacity to report back, so having a capacity of dual awareness, being fully immersed in an experience while simultaneously describing it without breaking the experience. And I've seen people who can do this, and I've seen other people who struggle with it, And then just to be able to remember what they experience, you know, good mental health, memory, recall, that sort of thing.
There is a question going back to spiritual health.
Yeah.
Do you expect somebody to have all these qualities under spiritual health? And what do you mean by cultivated spiritual practice?
So like a mindfulness practice, a prayer practice, it doesn't, you know, I'm not attached to it being of any particular religion or, you know, spiritual orientation. It's just a spiritual practice generally develops these capacities of staying engaged with something that may be difficult at times. You know, so what would be other examples? Maybe people can share some spiritual practices that have helped their psychedelic experiences. Also, cultivated spiritual practices, you know, provide some context for the experience, you know. And again, it's not about like dogmatic worldview or anything like that. It's just like an orientation to maybe something that is transcendent to the physical, you know, or at least inspiring, or at least provides a moral foundation to be kind to other people, you know. So that's kind of what I mean by that. And I don't expect people to have like, you know, these are things that I would be looking for, you know, self-acceptance, compassion, and empathy. I mean, these are important qualities to have for a psychedelic journeyer, you know, like you're required to look at difficult things. And so having the capacity to have self-acceptance is going to keep you from, you know, feeling really shitty sometimes. So.
Sweet, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people are saying isolation tanks, working with chi energy is a good practice.
Yeah, totally. Isolation tanks, sure. Let's definitely call that a religious or spiritual cultivation experience. Tai Chi, absolutely. You know, these are like Taoism. I mean, these are philosophies that people really, you know, inspire to adhere to and are difficult, right? So being able to stay with something helps. Mm-hmm. So responsible medicine use. Obviously, we're testing a medicine, so you can't just go out and use all kinds of medicines and then show up for the DMtx. You know, that can be clearly unsafe, and there's plenty of examples of people, you know, doing too much medicine. I think Dennis McKenna, you know, has shared a story about mushrooms and ayahuasca, and that leading to like, you know, really difficult to engage experience. And so we're looking more for skillful use over abundant use, you know. And so, and then also, you know, pharmaceuticals. So this is an area that if people have a diagnosis and are taking pharmaceuticals for them, it is possible. And I teach people and coach people how to get off of pharmaceuticals safely, or at least to try to see if they can. And, you know, so these are questions that we would have to address. And so, and just for the purposes of the study, you know, I don't think there can be much other drugs in our system, you know. Anything addictive, you know, tobacco, for example, I think it should be excluded, just because, you know, we don't want people feeling like they need to step out for a smoke every so often, you know, little things like that. But this is a complex issue in our community, and I have my own opinions on what safe and responsible medicine use looks like, and that's going to be different for different people, you know. But here's a principle of medicinal mindfulness that may help people stay safe in this crazy 2018 world of all of these medicines that are available. I came up with this term, know your medicine by covering your bases. Knowing your body's response to the medicine, and how you might do that is by taking less of it the first several times. Knowing how much it weighs, you know, is very important, you know, so always having scales handy. Getting it tested. There's really no excuses now for not testing your medicine, you know, Dance Safe and what is it, Bunk Police, and there's other products out there that can get your medicine tested. And I've gotten, and I know stories of people receiving medicines from trusted individuals and it just not being what they thought it was. The person not knowing even, you know, so, And then education of properties, history effects. Get on Arrowwood. There's, again, we didn't have that really, or I wasn't aware of that when I was younger, and I think these are tools that I look at when I'm coaching people. It's like, here, look at Arrowwood, read about it, that sort of thing. And then if you can trust its origin, know where it came from, what is the history of it. And again, a medicine grown with intention, is a safer medicine that, other than one found on the black market. So this is something that I really try to promote. Just to give an example, here are two white substances that pretty much look the same. MDMA, the typical dose is, it has a history, right? It has a long history of use. Typical dose is 80 to 125 milligrams. And on the right is Nbomi, N-bomb, whatever they're calling it these days, right? Like it's like a LSD-like medicine, and it can be put on blotter. But if you were to take 125 milligrams of this, thinking it was MDMA, as you would be clearly overdosing, and that less than 1 milligram. I mean, that is such a small amount, So even if you were just to taste a little bit of it and not know exactly what you're doing, you could really get hurt. There's an example a couple of years ago at a local festival where Nbomi was being sold as LSD, and it's just like LSD, except it can make people aggressive. And apparently, at one point in the medical tent, there were about 20 people tied down on this medicine. And this is just one example from a local festival that just happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah, there was a huge thing from lightning in a bottle back in May. A young woman died, and they were suggesting that it was LSD overdose, but Dan Safe and some other folks came out and said it was probably 2,5-I. That there's some speculation, but
I remember reading about that. Yeah, people don't normally die from a LSD.
Yeah, and even David Nichols chimed in, which is kind of cool. He's like, it's impossible. Like, you're not going to die from LSD. But yeah, 2,5-I kind of has this
right
curve.
Here, man. Yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't use this stuff, but people do. And if you think you're taking acid on a hit on a sheet and it has taste, it's probably 2,5-I and Nbomi. So be mindful of that. And then just to name that, like, we want people who like psychedelics, who are interested in psychedelics. This really is a program for the psychedelic community, and that there's a lot of books and education that we can step into. And I want to give a plug to Kyle and Joe's Navigating Psychedelics, Lessons on Self-Care and Integration, as a really great way to learn more of some of the basics. There's a whole conversation in the academic realms and the clinical realms of safety and right use, and so having like shared language is just something that really supports the community and would support our work. So, and Kyle, you're doing like an 8-week thing soon or something, like March?
Yeah, so I'm doing like a little, I'm calling it like a beta test group. We have this course up, and it's kind of like go at your own pace, but I kind of want to start having more face-to-face interaction. So it will be a closed group, 12 people, to just keep it small so we're able to contain the conversation. And we'll go through the Navigating Psychedelics course, meet up on Zoom, chat about the material, have a little bit of homework stuff, and just kind of start building like an integration community. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so our community is so isolated, and I would strongly encourage everyone to explore ways to safely connect with others in the community. So this would be a really good example of that. And if, and for therapists too, if anybody here has clients that are working with psychedelics, it's just really important that you have the language and understand some of the foundational strategies that people are talking about now. Even five years ago, people weren't talking about some of the stuff that they're talking about. And so just because you've done a drug doesn't mean you can be a good counselor for others who've done something. Pretty complex. So, this is why I showed that first slide of the complex arena that we're stepping into, is that, there's going to be some tough experiences ahead. I can't imagine there not being, and that doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. It just means we're really exploring a unknown boundary, right? And society doesn't really like that sometimes, like the status quo. So the ability to engage this, with maturity, like a history of having been through difficult things before, but also a maturity. I've noticed, some of the inquiries have been very unusual in the writing, and then some have also been very professional, and so just know that makes a impact on our perceptions, And so having previous experiences or engaging big processes, or engaging big life work, we want to work with experts in the field, and creative collaborators and manifestors in the world, especially with these first ones. I think these are going to be the most difficult. Again, not because it's the DMT, it's the context that's around it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've got for those 8 criteria. I wanted to go through them because, a lot of people have been asking about them. And then, more meta criteria is that would like to promote diversity in everything we do. And that's in regards to the team as well. Acknowledge I'm a white male and all of that, right? Like in the psychedelic community, could do some little work with inclusion, and supporting people of different backgrounds, and that we want this to be gender diverse as well. I'm curious, I could perceive somebody being younger than 30, making it through and being a really good candidate. I think there's some incredibly gifted human beings out there that, that are on the young side. But this is a question, particularly with the principal investigator and other team members, is how we want people to feel ready for this. We would expect this to be most likely a very life-changing experience. So have some foundation would be really great. And then there, this is something, I'm a healer, and I work with people one-on-one. This is something that's taken me a lot of time to get used to, but being on film, being interviewed, being part of a process that isn't super private, even though we would do everything we can to protect the privacy in regards to the experiment and everything, that this is a really big, gotten a lot of interest all over the world. So as we get closer to it, I'm expecting that to increase. And so how do we handle that, right? It's like a young athlete, starting in big arenas, right? Like it's a big deal to step into some of this work. So I want to name that, it's been a struggle for me. I've been in a couple of like filmings now and documentaries, and it's in doing something like this is new as well, that we're going to all be stepping into this work, into our public arena. So and
what was that
so
last?
That's what I've got for the criteria, and I'd love to hear any questions or thoughts or wonderings.
What was that last point about community engagement? Or creative and collaborative process. I guess I made the community engagement up.
Well, like I said, like there, the team is in the psychonauts are all on the same team. We're not studying necessarily someone, and there's a separate. Everything's separate between the team and the psychonauts, so we would expect there'd be collaborative training opportunities. We would all be doing some of the work together in preparation for the actual liftoffs, and so like being part of a creative process, wanting to be a part of a creative process and engaging that process, taking it seriously, to me would be, fun, right? This is about fun too, so.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So questions. There's one. Would you mind sharing your thoughts on psychonaut participant whom also belongs to a professional licensing board, which bans the professional's use of psychedelics? That's a tricky question.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it were an FDA-approved study in the States, I think you'd have some protections there. It's been a while since um, I'm pretty sure that there would be some protections there. It's been a while since I've looked at the NDMA research to that depth. We would be considering a religious freedom thing, and you wouldn't be doing it in an area that the DMT would actually be illegal, but absolutely there are professional risks to some of this. I don't think, I mean, like again, in research, your identity would be required to be confidential. And so there would be some layers of protection there. But if you were to tell other people, about your experiences, you might have to pay attention to who you share it with, because even friends might not think it's okay that you're doing it, and might, file a report and things. So this is a serious question, and I'll say, with the principal investigator, this is not just a question for the DMtx Psychonauts. It's a question for the team members as well. And so we would be addressing all of those questions and concerns with a lot of legal backing, to say the least. But that's a really important question. Again, I smoke cannabis with my clients in these sacred transformational experiences. Cannabis, even though it's legal in Colorado, is a Schedule I substance, and it's considered a substance of addiction in the mainstream. And so, that would clearly be in violation of my code of conduct as a counselor. And with that being said, there are a lot of counselors who have licenses who are providing medicines, in private settings, because they believe it's important, and that they don't believe it's a conflict morally with their code of conduct because it's done with intention. So this is a very complex issue, and I'd be happy to receive emails and learn, hear from you about that too. But yeah, there's an opportunity here to really showcase something, and we would want to do it in a way that provided enough privacy to people so that they could fully embody their own experience. So it's more of I would say this active public thing and privacy. It's more of a both and it might not. The public piece isn't a requirement to participate in the program, but even if there were privacy, there would still be risk, and I want to acknowledge that.
There's kind of a question about publicity. Are you looking for more publicity for DMTX? Do you want it to be in the spotlight, or do you want to keep it communal?
Yeah, that's a big question. So we have to have it big enough to get to the right people who one could collaborate on this project, and two, the right psychonauts. So we have to advertise it, to a significant degree. And I've made a personal commitment to not necessarily advertise it or try to advertise it to outside of the larger global psychedelic community. So I'm not really interested in, making waves in like the mainstream arenas. But yeah, some mainstream publications and things have written articles, and it will be on. There'll be an episode. This program will be on the Gaia Psychedelica, documentary series that they're doing. But again, most of the people who will be watching something like that will be psychedelic friendly or curious, to say the least. So it's a balance, and I have to pay attention, to my own capacities to engage publicity as well, right? And so this is kind of the edge that I've decided, is that let's promote it, let's get it out there to the right people. Let's not really engage the the difficult people who don't understand it. I don't really have any need to convince them, but not necessarily, like ego thing to tell everybody about it. I don't think that's relevant at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would just be helpful for funding if you're trying to get this publicly funded and
yeah, I mean, that's the big
privately funded.
Yeah. Yeah. The financial piece is really our only constraint. We have the expertise to do this. And so, yeah, we are looking for sponsors and people who have that capacity. And I'm also looking at ways to fund this without any large donors or financial support. So I'm actively engaging in different business ventures to fund this. And so anybody have any ideas, please.
Got to get into this psychedelic crypto thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patreon. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, I've looked at this, Kickstarters and things, like psychedelic Kickstarters haven't done super well, and Patreon, I'm curious about that, so again, like people's participation in this is helping me fund the time that I need to really develop these questions.
Mm-hmm. See, there is another question. Would it help if the participant were already a member of an organization that uses plant medicines for spiritual practice, like the ONAC, Native American Church?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want people with experience and skilled, intentional, and safe settings, right? So, I have a deep respect for the Native American Church and the ayahuasca churches as well. But it's not a requirement by any means. And you can have spiritual, membership in spiritual organizations that are completely not psychedelic related that would benefit a practice. So, and again, that's pointing to the, cultural diversity piece too, that, we don't want to, I don't know. I'm not trying to mimic a particular religious tradition or a DMT-based religious tradition. Like ayahuasca circles is kind of one of the points of this is to allow us to experience and explore these states without culturally appropriating. But we would want to and love to invite people in who are already members of these communities. I mean, this is one of the foundational pieces. This is for the psychedelic community. So.
Yeah. There's a statement, not really a question, but thought it might be good to share with you since you don't have your chat window up. Ira says, listening to Star Talk on my way home today and thinking about the similarities of actual modern astronaut training and the concept of psychonaut training you're putting forward now. There are a lot of similarities in this psychologically grounded and flexible state of the mind in the training. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can train for this. I think we can develop these capacities. I think we all have the ability to be really gifted in these areas. And what better reason to explore these capacities than extended-state DMT? It's like the biggest thing we could ever prepare for, and that's why I want y'all to check out that video. It's the speech I gave is called New Expeditions in Consciousness, Cyber DMT and Trans Cannabis, or something, or opposite, Cyber DMT and Trans Cannabis, New Expeditions in Consciousness. And there's a great mini-series docudrama that came out called Mars. It's based on like SpaceX's plan to recolonize Mars and all the shit everybody went through what the mission control went through, the team went through, all the things that can go wrong. And how they prepare and plan, and that training, these guys and women are training for 20 plus years before they even have an opportunity to even apply, and so what would happen if we developed our own capacities to that level? And I believe we can, and I believe there's a place for that. It's not just to trip. I think there's something relevant here. Yeah. So that's what we've got so far as regards to like what I would be looking for. And again, it's not about excluding people. It's about making sure we're all safe and that we want to promote the development of the psychedelic community through this process. And what better way to do that than to say, hey, we got this really great idea. Come join us. Come play with us. You know? So anything else, Kyle, before we shift gears a little bit?
Nope. There's just another comment. The Right Stuff is still the best movie about that. I haven't seen it. I don't know what that is.
It's an astronaut movie, isn't it? I forget what year that came out. That's all right. So, like the first webinar, you'll be receiving a handout. Excuse me. Talking about mindfulness practices that can be used to develop your psychedelic practice and develop these criteria, these capacities that we all have. And we're going to build on the body scan practice and talk about two other concepts. One, called a 5 awareness practice, is something I've developed from my own personal experience and a lot of different meditation orientations. And then tracking is not an uncommon concept in journey work communities and intentional psychedelic communities, or even non-medicine inner journey work communities. So let's review the body scan real quick. That we are developing these capacities to engage the process by practicing them again and again, and that this is why we call it a practice, that it does take time and intention, and sometimes it's hard to keep the practice going. It's engaging, but proprioceptive awareness, your capacity to feel inside your body, is something that can be enhanced using your breath as a resource. If you're having a difficult experience, being able to slow your breathing down, or using your breath to at least engage and make your way through an experience without dissociating or running away. Focused awareness, right? So if you're doing a body scan and you're focusing on an area of your body, relaxing your whole body, that requires focus. It requires staying with the process, and that can be developed, and that can even be measured. Can you stay with something for 5 seconds, or can you stay with something for 30 seconds or an hour or whatever it is? Everybody in psychedelic community and researchers and journeyers and guides and everything talk about the importance of surrendering, accepting, relaxing into an experience, allowing it to happen. And that inner knowing, understanding, intuition, another capacity that we can develop. Ability to understand what's happening, and then in the present moment do something with that, right? Is important, right? Instead of just being a passive participant or in the passenger seat, that we have a lot of agency when we realize we do. And then we talk about energetic discharges, and this is going to be something I'm going to talk about a little bit more today, and then it'll also come up in our third conversation around healing trauma. And this is how our body heals itself, by releasing excess energy, and that this energy can come out in all kinds of ways, either physically shaking, feeling a vibration in the body, but also cathartic, emotional experiences of memory, and so forth. So this is a very complex and multidimensional process. So I've been reviewing some of my old presentations, and a couple of little gems. I found some former gems that I haven't really thought about in a long time, and this is one of them. And this sums up what we're doing. So we'll call it the practice we teach is called mindful journey work, because it brings together mindfulness and what is traditionally called journey work practices, right? But mindfulness can be defined as awareness of present experience with acceptance. So the awareness, the focus awareness is there, and the acceptance is there, the present moment, like it's happening right here, right now, as opposed to what did happen or will happen, right? And acceptance is about, not about like being okay with what's arising. It's just accepting that it is arising, to not resist it, right? And I found that to be a really simple and good definition of mindfulness. Journey work has two definitions, which I thought were relevant to what I'm teaching. And that's to really acknowledge that we're engaging in an inner process that's incredibly complex and intriguing, like adventurous, exploratory, right? It's an expedition, and that we are encountering something. It feels like it's more than us, even if it's parts of ourselves. That it's a very vivid experience. But the second definition, necessary, routine, and menial work, I thought was great. The work of a journeyman. And you think of something that you have to do again and again and again. It can sometimes be monotonous or repetitive, right? And so doing the body scan or doing practices like this that are skill development are routine, are necessary, and sometimes feel menial, but a lot of the work I do with people is staying with something again and again and again to clear it. And that's like digging ditches sometimes, and it requires us staying with it. So there's a humility, like a humility embedded in the term journey work. I think a hands-on, building something with your hands, they're repetitive, right? Something very repetitive. So I want to name that piece, that like coming to breath work every 2 weeks, doing your body scan 3 times a week, even when you don't want to. Those are especially the best times to do these practices, is when you don't want to, so, a lot of good things can come out of that, right? So I wanted to just throw that in there. I thought it was really great. This is a light body. Is a concept. I'm gonna read something to you that I wrote here. It's in your thing. It's not that long, but I'd like to explain it in non-spiritual terms, because this has a lot of charge around this word. But the light body is a somatic and oftentimes visual representation of our physical form with greater psychedelic awareness. And boundaries of inside and outside begin to warp as we see that perhaps an entire universe lives within. With this greater awareness, we can sense or feel energy moving through our bodies through things like meridians, feel body energy centers that may correspond to concepts like chakras, right? I'm putting quotes in them in the writing, and even feel an awareness of a body or energetic form that is greater than our physical form, such as connecting with our electromagnetic field or what you would call our aura, right? And whether or not these are real or objective is that they can be, can also be described as a symbolic representation of psyche structures, like visual symbolic representation of psyche structures, injuries and illnesses, and also capacities of being human. So when we talk about, I spoke about this term that we call visual proprioception. This is a real experience, at least, people experience it as real, which is the ability to see inside your body, or to see the energetic structure of your light body in a psychedelic experience. This is a very real experience for some people. Here's a good example from our community. This is Alex Gray. That this is a visual representation of somebody's experience of becoming fully awakened, and their energy center being aligned. And here's another really pretty one too, I thought was nice. And so the light body as at least a metaphor is going to be really important. And if it is just symbolic, there's still important information in engaging it as real. And unfortunately, the reason I'm bringing it up here is that, like, really speaking, it's like very few of our light bodies look like these wonderful, awakened, clear selves, that we are completely gummed up by things like excess energy, unnecessary energy, previous experiences we haven't let go of, traumas, right? And like our meridians are all blocked in different ways. Everybody has blocks in our meridians. All of our chakras are gummed up or not spinning in the right direction, and that, symbolically speaking at the very least. And that this is what is a source of trauma. And let's see, where did I had a funny quote in here, but anyway, and what this is, the reason I'm bringing it up is that I want to talk about another concept called dross. And this is an alchemical concept. This is like Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of dross. And the reason it's coming from the alchemy tradition is that it's unwanted material that is removed from something such as gold to make it better, more pure, clearer, right? Dross is something of low value, the scum, right? Waste or foreign matter. And psychologically speaking, dross, in my opinion, is like everything that we consider gets us stuck in some way or another, right? And that trauma, what we would call clinically trauma, is really an accumulation of this dross, this excess substance in our psyches. And this is all the ways that dross can show up, in that it's not attached to a particular way of showing up. It's like an archetype or something, right? Stuckness, and how it shows up in all its forms. And so physical tension in the body, pain, disease, massage therapists talk about clearing kinks in our fascia system, clearing energy systems through acupuncture and things. Excess energy is something that we really need to pay attention to, and it's like, and that this can feel like concrete in human beings. I don't, Kyle, you might. Like when somebody is in breath work and it looks like they're literally breaking out of chains or breaking free of concrete, and they say it was painful and it was hard, but they feel so much better. This is what they're breaking out of, is this concept called what I call dross. And another reason I use this term is that it's less negative connotation of trauma. It's not as charged as the word trauma. But emotional experiences can be a form of dross. Unwanted thoughts, compulsions, belief systems that no longer serve us. Something that stops us from being who we are is a form of dross. Another thing that we encounter in our community is what we would call pharmaceutical residues. Like people who have been on Adderall or other ADD medication for long periods of time. They say it feels like there's like this substance that's inside of them that prohibits them from fully living their lives, and that we can clear things like that. And then external factors could even be considered dross as a reflection of our inner experience. So oppression, racism, anything that blocks our full potential. So we can have inner dross that prohibits us from showing up and makes us heavy in our lives, can cause depression, anxiety, PTSD. All of the clinical disorders, I think, could be traced to excess of different kinds of this particular psychic material. And when I say psychic material, I mean like that could be, even concepts, psyche, psychological systems and things in the body, right? And so part of our work as psychedelic psychotherapists and psychonauts is, who are doing our own healing work, is to clear this dross and to become light as a feather. If the light body is pointing to something that is transcendent of self, the light body is what we're traveling in. It's what our consciousness travels in the spirit world, right? If we're going to go into that orientation, right? But it can also be, the light body can also be how we travel through a visual representation of our psyche and different aspects of ourselves. And the more we can clear this dross, the more freedom we have to engage deeper and deeper transformational processes. And psychedelics, more than anything I've ever experienced, and breath work, let's put breath work into this category, is that we have a capacity as a community to engage healing this stuff, and engaging healing to a degree that most people don't have access to. And I think it's important that we step more into promoting the healing function of different psychedelic psychotherapies, for the planet. Like we really need it. Like we need MDMA assisted psychotherapy yesterday, right? And as beautiful as MDMA assisted psychotherapy is, it's not enough. There's certain other kinds of traumas, that might be better healed with other psychedelics or breath work, cannabis, things like that. What can you imagine what a soul level trauma would look like? What would a soul injury look like? Can we conceive of that? Something so deep that it feels like an injury to our soul. And DMT and mescaline are things that can help restructure and clear that, whether it's an experience of being worked on by a higher dimensional doctor, or it's just your chakras start to realign and clear, right? It doesn't really matter sometimes the experience itself, but the outcomes are pretty amazing, And we see this all the time as therapists and healers and practitioners, even people who are, not engaged, not working with guides, can do this healing work. And this is the foundation of it, is healing dross. Let me see if there's anything else I want to share about.
I really like that terminology. I haven't heard dross before. There was a really interesting talk by Joe Taffer back in 2013 at the Psych Science Conference, talking about integrating Western medicine and traditional ayahuasca shamanism, and talking about the similarities kind of between the stories of, maybe these are hungry ghost traumas and shamanic cultures, bringing on disease and illness. And then from his medical perspective, it's maybe it's allostatic load, there's just high amounts of stress in the body. So, kind of the same thing, talking about this buildup of dross in the body and clearing it out. And
yeah, absolutely. And the experience of clearing a hungry ghost out of your system and excess stress is pretty much the same,
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people have to shake it out, clear it out, release it in some way, and with a psychedelic, you might have very unusual content that looks like a spirit is clearing or something like that. And, it might just be two different ways of describing a very similar phenomenon. But if it becomes visual, if you have a visual representation of the trauma clearing, it can look like it's like people talk about having demons extracted out of them, like something so old, it feels so powerful, it's just taken over in some way. In a psychedelic, somebody takes a psychedelic with intention, it purges it, clears it. And then, in the Native American church communities and things, they bury it, if there's physical vomiting involved, so that those spirits don't come back, but that, that's also symbolic of, you got to stay clear. You got to do your work. You got to, integrate the experience into your life, do something different, not just go back into the same patterns, or that stress or that spirit will come back, I like the term dross. I came across it in, reading about alchemy, and a lot of the alchemical stages, there's a lot of alchemy embedded in the work we do, this alchemy symbolism. And for me, I felt a little more comfortable engaging that terminology than shamanic terminology, for a few reasons. But I actually really connect with this terminology, and it's a very real experience for me.
Yeah, I like it. It's cool.
And it's a little easier to talk about than trauma, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just checking the time. We're doing pretty good. So that's dross and light body. We're going to switch a little bit and talk about the next meditation practice. called tracking. And this is something that you'll engage after the body scan. And then we'll close with discussing what we call a 5 awareness practice, and why you should use it to help develop your inner awareness. So like any healing experience, we can only go so far in a passive state. So the body scan meditation is like an initial state of tracking, or clear, like you're tracking, but in a very specific way, your body's experience, and individually relaxing your muscles one by one and deepening your meditative space, right? And in that experience, you're going to have all kinds of energetic discharges, twitching, understandings, or just like deep emotional experiences just from the body scan practice. But I've never considered it enough. It is the foundation for developing these skill sets, but we have to go deeper than that. And there's a concept that I've learned from a lot of different traditions, from even being a young adult and interested in meditation and journey work practices and things. And there's different languaging for it, but I call it tracking. And just as a hunter would track a animal through a forest, that we can track experiences in our inner awareness to deeper, more complex, or more transformational experiences, and that there's ways to engage these spaces in the inner state. But right now, I want to just talk about the concept itself, what it means, and then talk more about the how to perceive these, like tracking it, like how do you perceive it, right? It's not as easy. This is an invisible landscape, so it's not as easily as like seeing something in the snow in front of you, right? And just following it. So after your body scan, there's some there'll be some in your homework assignments, some recommendations for music. And so what you can do is you can attach the body scan and put it on the top of a playlist. There's there's 3 different versions of the body scan that I have online. There's the 60-minute one. It's about 20 minutes body scan and then 40 minutes of music. Then there's just the body scan, the 22-minute body scan, and then there's a shorter body scan, like a 16-minute or so. What you're going to want to do is take one of those, the 22-minute or the 16-minute one, and tack it onto the top of a music set. Something, and I'm going to give you, in the sheet, I've given you some good recommendations to play with music-wise. And the music helps evoke an inner experience. It evokes something in the body. And that's why we use music in psychedelic psychotherapies and breath work and such. But after you do the body scan practice, there's a mantra that or a subtle practice that you can engage. The mantra is, bring awareness to my body, use my breath to surrender. You take a big breath with it, right? Bring awareness to my body and use my breath to surrender. So you're always engaging your breath through these practices. Belly breathing, gently nudging up against the edges of tension and letting go. Breathing again and letting go. I'm going to teach y'all a basic breath work practice to amplify the experience in the next class. But the most important piece is, in each present moment, what are you most aware of in your body, in your psyche, in your inner experience? Just what do you notice? Like, it might be a tension in your back. It might be your bladder. It might be an itch, that you want to scratch, right? It might be an emotional experience. It's just what you notice in the present moment. And then you take a breath with it. You witness it. You bring your awareness to that location in your body, and you take a breath with it. And then you repeat it. Now what do I notice? What am I most aware of in my body? And you take a breath with it. And then you repeat. Now what do I notice? And what you're doing is you're tracking, you're following what's occurring inside yourself. And what you might notice is that tension in your back might have moved an inch to the right. And the next time you take a breath, you might felt a twitch go out of your right leg, and it somehow energetically is related to that tension in your back. And then you take a breath and you might notice that you just feel really angry about nothing for no reason. And then the next breath, you might remember that, hey, when I was a kid, I got hurt there in my back, and it really hurt, and I was mad. I didn't want that to happen. Then you take a breath and you feel the energy move a little bit more in your psyche, right? And you're just tracking, you're exploring what's going on. And what this does is it allows the energy of these deeper traumas or deeper dross to create enough space around them so that there's enough room for them to leave your system, to discharge out of your body. And you can facilitate that process by simply bringing compassionate, gentle, kind, self-accepting awareness to it without resisting it. And I'm gonna, I don't know if I want to go too deep into like ways of tracking. I do bring this into the worksheet, but there's a lot of things you can do in this practice. Does anybody have any questions so far about this concept? Or do you have any questions or anything showing up, Kyle?
There's no questions about this, but there was a few questions that came up before. I was just waiting for a good time to pause.
Okay, let's address those, and then I'll keep going.
Okay, cool. So John said, I remember that in the previous class you mentioned a best case timeline for 2020. What is the estimated timeline to have the away team chosen?
Yeah, I think about 6 months before that, because we want to do training with the team and the psychonauts. And again, this is best case scenario. Like I mapped it out. How long do I want to train people? How long do I think the protocol will take to be developed? And so, really, the biggest factor is funding. And on the other end of that scale, like I've committed to giving myself 10 years. I've committed to 10 years of exploring extended state DMT research. So if I don't do it within 10 years, I'll move on to the next thing. Maybe somebody else will take it on. But I think it's feasible to do the 2020 date. So the September training, it's I don't know if it's going to be a real actual training, but it will be some sort of gathering of bringing people together who are interested in being psychonauts, and then putting you through a rigorous experience and seeing how you engage it. And so doing these practices now will help develop your capacity to fully show up for that.
Awesome. And then Jack asks, have you ever considered experimenting with different frequencies during the extended state DMT? Do you think higher or lower frequencies will affect the trip? And you just said elaborating, frequencies such as 432 hertz or 1212
yeah
hertz.
Like if yeah, right,
binaural
right.
beats or something.
Music's going to be a big part of it, and I would love for people to send me recommendations of music that you like for journeys, and I'm giving you some really good resources of music, so please share. And I spend a lot of time thinking about music, so like A = 432. I can tell a difference, and our musicians in the our breathwork program use all of their instruments are keyed to that frequency. But would we particularly provide a particular tone or a brain, like a frequency that corresponds to a brainwave pattern? I don't know the answer to that yet. But yeah, would we have drumming versus gentle tones? Different sound, gentle sounds. That could elicit a very different psychedelic DMT state. So that's a really important question. I don't know the answer to it yet.
Yeah.
But music evokes an inner response, and so that is why it helps with tracking, because it evokes an experience. So like imagine like you're listening to gentle music and all of a sudden something's jarring, right? You're going to startle. And so what is it like to track a startle response through your system? Well, you can feel your heart rating. You feel the your breath change. It might elicit fight or flight, nervous system activation. You might literally feel the adrenaline start kicking in, right? And so learning how to relax into these states and engaging how the music, how you respond to music is like training for like how the medicine's going to affect you, you know? So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, what else?
Thanks. That was about it for the questions, but Owen says working on some things in regard to funding to the study. So,
all right, well, keep coming, man. Yeah, we need all the help we can get, you know. So, learn to say yes to support and help through this process. You know, I'm a healer. I'm not a fundraiser. I don't, you know, there's something that's very foreign to me, and but I'm learning some of the skill sets, and again, looking for ways to do this so that we remain independent and sustainable. You know.
mm-hmm.
So I have one more concept around tracking that I'd love to share with you all, and that is this idea of what Stan Groff would call your inner radar. And what Michael Mithofer, who does the MDMA studies, so Stan Groff did all the LSD research, you know, and a lot, the word transpersonal comes from Stan Groff's work, you know, so there's I have a deep respect for his orientation, and it was really necessary in me understanding my own awakening process and the healing process that I was going through when I was younger, you know. And so this idea of inner radar, Michael Mithofer calls it the inner healing intelligence. And the idea is that your body or your psyche naturally draws your awareness to what you're most ready to turn towards and heal. In any given moment, and Groff would also talk about our holotropic nature, which is this natural tendency to move towards wholeness and healing in our highest capacities as human beings, right? And so if we put that concept onto this idea of tracking, then all we're really doing is turning towards using our inner radar, right, our inner proprioceptive awareness to turn towards what we're most present to. And if what Groff is talking about and what the MDMA therapists are talking about and what I've experienced repeatedly, that if it's true that this is what we're most ready to heal, then we can surrender into the experience. We can relax into it. We can trust this concept called trust the process, knowing that even if it's difficult, even if it's in some cases incredibly difficult, that we can trust it to that we'll survive it, that we will feel better afterwards. And some of these processes take like extended periods of time and multiple experiences, and sometimes we don't end on a positive note. But even in the integration of a really hard trip, we can acknowledge and accept that this is a holotropic experience, and we are moving towards healing and wholeness. We just have to stay with it, you know, through to its end, and that there will be a completion, at least a stage of completion, you know. And so the more you do this, the more you practice tracking, the more you practice engaging your inner radar, for lack of a better term, the more you practice surrendering into an experience, even if it's painful, difficult, and you start to see that there's a benefit to it, that you felt better afterwards, or that you didn't have to engage a struggle as much anymore, that then that elicits a deeper level of trust when you're ready, you know, when you're looking at something. That inner radar points to something that is extremely difficult, you know, and all the signs are saying, don't, you know, anything but this, don't look at it, or, you know, look at anything but this. Usually that's a signpost that says, yeah, proceed with caution, not run away screaming, you know. So developing a trust through experience of this inner radar is really important, and there's really no way around doing it. You can think about it all you want, but this is how you do it. This is the process. So let's see. I think I have. Okay, so here's what I call a mantra. You know, this is just a very simple meditation prompt that you continue to that you can repeat as you stay with an experience. What do I most notice about what's happening in my body in any given moment? I allow myself to rest in that space, my awareness to rest in that space while I breathe with it. and something will begin to transform, something will begin to move. And so you take the next step, you're tracking the experience, you're moving forward with it. Now what do I notice in my body? And you move through it, you breathe with it. And there's, this idea of dross is that some of this stuff can feel really chunky, it can feel impenetrable, it can feel like you're never going to get through it. These are all bullshit deflection things that our psyche throws at us, or parts of ourselves that are scared of waking up throw at us to stop us from stepping into these spaces. So usually when you're touching on something that's really difficult, or feels impenetrable, or you're hopeless or something like that, is usually those are really important areas to turn towards and heal and clear. And so you just stay with it. And eventually, the more you clear your system of this dross, and the more you clear your system, and, I've been doing this particular, tracking since, for over 20 years, over half my life. I do, it is an ongoing process. It doesn't ever feel like it's ever complete, but there are different stages. And the more you develop these capacities, the more you can stay with someone else's experience that's having a difficult time, right? These are the foundations of being a good facilitator and guide, is to stay with the process and to support somebody staying with the process. And if you can't look at somebody else's shit with them, there's no way they're going to be able to. So these are good practices. Here's a couple of strategies to really make it vivid. The idea of inner experience, tracking an inner experience vivid. If you go outside on a cold day without a coat, stand there until you start to shiver, what would it, that's an explicit inner, sensation experience. Where do you feel the shiver in your body? It becomes more explicit. It's like sometimes these sensations are very subtle. You can also track where, how the shivering moves through your body. And you can also engage the shivering in a way that you can direct the energy of the shiver through your system. So that's one way to try out what this inner awareness is like. And then another one, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I've done it before, is like, you can clench your toes until they cramp, and it's like, oh my God, that really hurts. I'm doing it right now. I have to stop before I completely get overwhelmed by the sensation of it. But if you clench your toes until they cramp, to the point of like severe pain and all of that stuff, if you relax around that experience, instead of try to alleviate it by stretching your toes back out and that sort of thing, what will happen is eventually your body will start to release on its own. So there will be a huge cramping and contraction, and it's like really painful, really difficult. And some of these experiences are like this, very difficult to engage, but eventually it'll start to release out on the other side. And it's a very explicit example of what tracking could be like. But metaphor, right? That might be an emotional tension that you're having to engage, right? And staying with it, breathing with it, allows it to discharge and release. And then I bet, Kyle, you can relate to this one too. But breath work is a very visceral, physical, engaging inner experience that anytime you add breath to something, it amplifies our awareness of it. So, and some of those are real painful contractions. And then if you continue to stay with them, track them, don't resist them, they'll start to release on the other side and clear. And then deep understandings occur. There might be an emotive release, good cry or good laugh. And then deep understandings of reframing situations that were painful to the point where you can move on from them and understand why you might have had to go through them. So this is tracking.
I'm right there with you with breath work, seriously. Sometimes when I do meditations and I'm doing that tracking and just seeing what's in my body, I think it was like last night actually, I felt all this tension in my jaw, and I was kind of just stretching and kind of just exploring that feeling, and then started breathing into it. And then as you breathe into it, or at least for me, it starts to intensify, and then a bunch of emotions started to come, and it was a nice little release. I was like, okay, I feel better now.
Yeah, right. That's a
Yeah.
great example of what I'm describing. You just stay with it. You breathe
Mhm.
with it. You don't try to, like, getting in your head and trying to figure something out. That's like the worst thing you could do in these experiences, because it pulls you out of the process. The most I'd recommend doing is simply naming, because that gives you a capacity to understand what's going on. So naming it. I feel tension in my jaw. I feel something building energetically. I have a somatic release, like a good cry, or, my eyes tear up or something. And then I have an understanding of why that was necessary and why I was holding it. And that maybe I can move forward in a different way now.
Mhm.
And that this is that journey work, that repetitive. It's different parts of the body, or sometimes it's the same part that you have to clear another layer of. This takes a lot of time, and psychedelics facilitate that, and it does speed it up. But or at the very least, it just makes this work doable. It's not a shortcut, or you can just take LSD, 4 hits of LSD one time and be clear of it all. I haven't seen that much of people having the life transforming experiences without a lot of integration and clearing of this dross.
Yeah, and the,
you know
the the jaw and neck thing comes up for me all the time in breathwork sessions. It's just like, okay, I thought I processed this, and then boom, it
yeah
comes back. It comes back.
yeah well, there's two things there. One, you might be approaching cycling into another layer of it,
Yep.
clearing another layer. And people who've done psychedelics know that those layers can go pretty deep, like many lifetimes or generations and things like that. And then two, we accumulate. We pick up dross on a pretty daily basis too. So thinking of these breath work or breath work too, but body scans, tracking as like maintenance practices. Why we would do yoga every other day or something like that.
Hmm.
You got to keep clearing it. And I experience it all the time too. So. But we all have that spot that we store deep stuff in, and being able to travel into that space is really important for our healing. And with psychedelics, what that can do is it can open our capacity to, like, it expands our body awareness to a point where we can actually travel into it. It can be a visual experience of traveling into something and clearing it out, engaging it, exploring it, releasing. It can be a very multidimensional experience.
Hmm.
All right, let's talk about this next step here. And then that's all I've got, but there's still a little bit more to go through. And I put this image here, the symphony of the psychedelic experience. Imagine each one of these instruments is not just a sound, but a way of perceiving, right? Like every single one of them was a way of perceiving, either emotional experience, a visual experience, a physical sensation, an energetic sensation, that there's so many different ways of experiencing it. And that if you just played one of these instruments, right, or a few of these different instruments, without the whole orchestra or symphony, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? And what we want to do then is develop our capacity to perceive all of these ways of perceiving simultaneously. It's like I don't really have to think hard about seeing something and hearing it at the same time, right? It's just something I do. It's not quite the same in psychedelic experiences. Sometimes we might be engaging a process and it feels like the mute button is on. We can't quite get what's going on, or all of a sudden the sound comes back on, but then the channel changes, or the visual process disappears, or it gets really confusing and muddled, right? So our capacity to perceive internally is really important in our capacity to understand what the heck is even going on. And this is a good, I think the symphony is a really good metaphor for this. It's just incredibly complex, So one of the things I've discovered is that with the body scan is that we're not just becoming aware of physical sensations, we're becoming aware of multiple sensations and awarenesses simultaneously. And sometimes if we break it down and explore certain aspects or one aspect over another, we can start to understand the different parts. Oh, I hear that flute come in, right? I have a better hearing for that particular melody now. Oh, and I can see where they're going with that deep sound right there. I can name both of them simultaneously. And so to keep it simple, I've broken down ways of perceiving into 5 ways. And again, this is one model. This isn't the truth. It's just I found it useful. So physical sensations, energetic sensations, those two are really coupled. I'll explain a little bit more. Feeling and emotions, having an emotional response to something. And then also thoughts, memories, and beliefs. Like, I don't know about you, but I have a running commentary in my head often of what I'm experiencing. It's like, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I'm talking to myself. I'm coaching myself in these experiences. I'm not always in like a Zen, no thinking state, or I'll have judgments about what my experiences are. And if I can identify them, then I can maybe not buy into them as much, right? Or understand that they're deeply held belief systems and are important to me. And then with psychedelics, one of the most common experiences is that it's very visual in some way, right? With their eyes closed, it might be imaginal, dreamlike, hyper dreamlike, DMT, hyper vivid, hyper colorful, that sort of thing, but also symbolic. You're not just seeing colors, you're seeing an image of a cup, or an image of a ship, or an image of a geometric form, right? Like there's a very imaginal, creative process occurring here. I love Carl Jung's work and depth psychology and dream images. It's so important in psychedelic awareness to explore our dreams in the images of our experiences. So I'd like to break this down a little bit. We have a little time, physical sensations. So I've got a really great worksheet for you all, and this lists all of them and also gives you prompts, like meditation prompts that you can explore yourself in the body scan, right? And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do this, but I actually got a meditation online. So the same page as the body scan meditation, there's a new meditation now called the 5 Awareness Practice. And I don't have rights to any music for it, so we took the music out so that you could download it and put it on your playlist without me breaking any copyright laws. But you can also, there's a recommendation. You can also play like the body scan meditation on the website, and then play Spotify. You can play meditation music from your other apps, iTunes and so forth, and listen to them both simultaneously if you want to do it with the music. So check that out, and I think I listed in there as a possibility, but I was able to get it online thanks to a friend's help. So doing a body scan, you can do a body scan and just focus on physical sensations of the body. Where do you feel pain? Where do you feel tension? You can bring awareness to just energetic sensations, temperature, changes in temperature, movement, currents, like feeling your stomach swirling or something. That's not a physical sensation. Your stomach can't swirl around. Your arms can't physically get longer, right? So a sensation of things like that might be more of an energetic sensation. You feel vibrations, frequencies, waves, pulses. There would be examples of energetic sensations. Feelings and emotions. I'm sending you all what we call a feeling wheel, which is just a feeling words. I don't know, there's a lot of them on it, 60 or more or something like that. A lot of us don't have a lot of language for complexity of feeling, right? So we might feel sad or mad, but in reality, might be a lot of grief and anger in there. Even complex emotions like grief include a lot of have love and positive emotions in them, right? Confusion People say I'm confused in psychedelic states all the time, right? Or in a therapy session or something like that. And what's really going on is that they're maybe experiencing multiple feelings at the same time, and they don't know how to differentiate. You know, like I don't know how to feel happy and sad at the same time, right? And that's very easy to do, right? If you think of any transition in life, you're leaving something that you might love and really appreciate. So you feel sad about it, but you're also stepping into something that you value and are excited for and feel extreme amount of joy for. And so what's it like to feel joy and deep grief at the same time? You know, so having a language for this and being able to discern what emotions you're feeling is really important. Thoughts, beliefs, memories, this is part of the inner terrain, that memories actually feel like a territory that we can travel into on psychedelics. And so being able to say, oh, I'm remembering something now, right? It's like, oh, that's a memory that happened in the past. You know, you can engage it more. Having, you know, like the running commentary, if it's not helpful, being able to discern that and to not identify, to believe it wholeheartedly, like I'm doing it wrong is a common statement that people have in breath work, particularly the first time. You know, like, am I doing this right? Like they have this running commentary in their head. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Well, just name it and keep breathing, you know, instead of buying into it and stopping the process. They're all interrelated, right? So if I feel like I'm doing something wrong, I might have an emotion of shame, right? And so being able to name shame is then it's like, okay, I'm feeling shame. So there's something I can do with that. I'm going to breathe through it and imagine it leaving my system, clearing, not trying to fix it or get rid of it or run away from it, you know? So those are important, right? And then the visual piece, you know, so this is like, I don't know, it's pretty self-explanatory. You might be able to, you might have experiences of seeing color, seeing energy, right? That visual proprioception, seeing your light body, right? Naming it, oh, this is my light body, this is a representation of my psyche, this is what I'm feeling. But it can also be very symbolic, you know, like seeing a flower blooming, seeing an image of a sun rising, you know, over some mountains, or a crystal clear pond, or candles in a sacred space. You know, like these have symbolic representations, and being able to understand, name, and explore these, having language for them, will cultivate your capacity to see it even more clearly, right? And what happens with psychedelics is that we have these real specific synesthesia experiences. An emotional state corresponds to a visual experience, which corresponds to a somatic release, which corresponds to memories and other experiences that you've had that are similar, and then corresponds to like a weird transpersonal, symbolic, hyperdimensional element, right? They're all part of a same experience. And so in a sense, it's like going back to this orchestra image, and instead of trying to identify the flute and just focusing on the flute, is that you can surrender and relax into being completely inundated with sensory and awareness processes, and appreciate it, enjoy it, and listen to the music of it, and eventually learn how to make this music of your own, right? And so practicing, going back to, you know, why are we doing this? Practicing awarenesses, particularly you can do the 5, right, individually in the body scan or the tracking, or you can just start naming your experience. Oh, at this point I'm feeling a physical pain in my body. I feel a vibration, a frequency around it, like it's trying to, it's anxious and wants to move. And I'm pointing to an emotional experience of, oh, I feel fear right now. Oh, well, what's it like to really feel fear, right? And staying with it and breathing with it and allowing it. It's like, oh, and then I start having memories of those times that like I felt this fear. And what I realize is that I never quite completed that process when I was physically afraid, like something happened in my life and I was afraid. That got stuck in me somehow. And so I go back to the physical sensations and I relax all around them. And I go back to the energetic discharges and track them as they leave my body, kind of opening up a channel for them to leave my system. I allow myself to feel that anxiety because it's expressing and leaving my system. And it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to be, it's okay to feel scared or to need to cry because it scared the living hell out of me, right? I never let myself cry that time, so I'm going to let myself cry this time for it, right? And then going back to those belief systems, what did I make that experience mean? Maybe that was not true. Maybe I'm an okay person and whatever that wasn't my fault. And that I can move forward knowing that that's done, it's over, it's in the past, right? And then all of a sudden I'm having these, images of angels coming down and like blessing me with forgiveness of everything that's involved, right? And then I go back to the physical body. What else is there? What other layers can I get to? Oh, and then it points to like a past life memory, right? A transpersonal experience that makes it all make sense on a soul level. Then I have another big cry, or I smile and just feel incredible bliss. What's that like in my body? Feeling bliss in my body. Can I let that in completely? Can I let my whole body feel it, right? Can I move that through my body and let my whole body experience it? Oh, the bliss I can't feel the bliss in my gut. Why can't I feel bliss in my gut? I'm going to go into that right now. Explore that. Breathe into it. Oh, I feel nauseous. Oh, what else is there, right? It just keeps going. It just keeps going. And the more we clear, the more advanced light we become, the more transpersonal phenomenon we can explore in these psychedelic states. And then it becomes global, transpersonal. I'm doing this work to not only heal myself, but to heal all the people who suffered in this way on the planet. May this be a prayer for others. May my suffering mean something and help someone else, right? There could be a transpersonal phenomenon, or me waking up helps, the social mechanism. I'm not going to vote the same way I used to vote. I'm not going to buy the same products, right? It has an impact on my behavior, which then impacts the planet, right? And it's because we're doing these practices and we're exploring these inner ways of perceiving, I enjoyed saying that. It's like you could just keep going. Like with psychedelic experiences, this could last like 8 hours, just following and tracking and exploring and engaging and breathing and laughing and crying and rolling around on the floor, moving and stretching, that sort of thing, right? And so this is how we heal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna do a time check. That was really great. Kind of started reminding me of like some of Stan's theories on coex themes. But yeah,
totally. Yeah. Read Stan Groff, Holotropic Mind. You gotta get some theory behind you if you're gonna do this work.
Yeah. So we're about like 3 minutes to the hour.
Yeah. I got a little bit of assignment stuff to go over, but also can answer questions. What would you like to do first?
Well, I guess, assignments. There's one question I want to get to by Jason talking about a sitter, but yeah, if you want to go over.
Well, let's just finish up here real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be emailing everybody on our list a new handout and also a worksheet on intuition, which I think is incredibly important to develop your capacity to intuit something, because we're working in an invisible landscape and we don't have all the information to make decisions like in a logical way, but practice the 5 awareness practice creating music sets, and have fun with this experience. It's a little bit of a creative writing assignment. Design your DMtx expedition ship. If you were going on a real expedition, like a physical expedition into DMtx space, what would your ship look like? Which, is again, symbolically brings up shows us a lot of information about how we're doing, how our energetic structure in the field is. What kind of practices can you incorporate? Again, not try to do it all or be perfect. This is not about being a superhuman. It's about being, a skilled and glorious and perfect human. But what areas can you develop? What areas are missing in your life that you could explore? And then here's the intuition feeling vocabulary. And then the next class, we'll be talking trauma resolution, shadow work, and I'm going to teach you a gentle breathwork practice to help increase your capacity for healing. And we're skipping next week, just so I could be sustainable in my crazy busy life. And then don't forget the Psychedelics Today training that we talked about earlier. And for those of you who are local, February 8th is our next breath work. So again, this is a practice that we do pretty regularly in Boulder to keep healing and clearing that dross. And then if you have any questions, logistical questions, Andy is there to support you, and she can be reached at events@medicinalmindfulness.org. And then any assignments, anything you want to send me or any questions about the content, you can email me at DMtx@medicinalmindfulness.org. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, so it's at the hour, but I'm willing to stick around for, 15 minutes or so to answer questions. If you want to stick around for questions, awesome. If you have to run, then yeah, definitely run. Just really quick too, if you didn't sign up for the Teachable platform, you want to rewatch this, you can send me an email at Psychedelics Today, email@gmail. Or I could, let me know if you haven't signed up for that, and I'll answer those questions.
Yeah, and you can email us too about that.
Yeah. And reminder for some folks that might have jumped in late, you can use the same Zoom link to access this. I think you can even add it to Google Calendar if you go back to that webinar page. So maybe it just pops up for you if you use Google Calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same Zoom link, everybody. So we're learning the technology as much as everybody here. So
yeah, cool. I wanted to get to this question by Jason. It was kind of sitting there, so I'm sorry, Jason, for keeping you. If you got to run, sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead and let me X out of the stop share thing so I can see pictures or questions here too. All right.
Cool. So he said, because of intense aspect of the experience, it seems it would make sense for there to be an established bond between the psychonauts and sitters. Do you see this happening organically through the process, or do you see any kind of formal process for sitters and their relationship to the psychonauts?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of this with the training, like how much do we include the training in the protocol, and how much will that protocol limit us into the type of training that we would love to do? But yeah, I envision multiple experiences over many months where the psychonauts, potential psychonauts, and then the psychonauts are getting together with the team and engaging practices together. And one simple practice, in the assessment and interview process is going to be pretty developed, right? So you'd be being interviewed and having conversations with multiple members of the team as part of the assessment process, and that would include me and Carla as the lead sitters and guides for these experiences, but also would include our assessment expert, who would be more like an independent rater, person. And they would be also somebody that you would be speaking to, pre and post session to get, for us to get data on. But like one of the maybe, I don't know, like we could call it team building processes would be to do dry runs, like set up the space as best we can to mimic the experience and go through the process. What would it be like for everybody to be in that space without the medicine before we left? And I think that would be evocative in and of itself. And the sitters would need that experience because there's a lot of technical pieces that we would have to be prepared for, particularly like the dosage and the DMT drip and how do you assess somebody while they're rising in the experience? How do you assess somebody if they're not fully in it, right? So there would be a lot of opportunities for us to like share what we would call sacred space, even when there's no medicine involved. So I think it'll be organic, and also I think we need to specifically, develop not just rapport, but real authentic rapport, between the sitters and the psychonauts. Again, we're all on the same team. It's just y'all are, the DMTX people will be the away team. We're shipping you off into the psyche. So we want to treat you really well. We want to be really kind, and we want to provide like so much support. Like this is not something that we want to send people off on one-way trips or anything like that. We want you to come back and land and feel really good from the experience. So yeah.
Awesome.
What else?
Ira wanted to follow up, but let me answer some other ones for assignments really quick. Can you reference all the readings and lectures you both mentioned online? We'll try to remember all those, and I'll put them up on Teachable. I wrote down the podcast and probably some of Stan Groff's books. I don't know if you had anything in your thing that or your presentation.
I have a link to the podcast, and I have some more handouts to hand you, and some music recommendations. But yeah, what else can we? Yeah, Kyle, if you want to get a list together, I've thought about creating a book list. I haven't had a chance to yet. So Holotropic Mind by Stan Groff, probably be an essential read. Another great book, The Emerald Tablet by Dennis William Hauck, Hauck, is a really great introductory resource on alchemy and a lot of the processes that we talk about.
Emerald Tablet, you said?
The Emerald Tablet by Dennis William Hauck, Hauck.
All right, cool.
Nothing to do with psychedelics, although he does mention a mushroom trip he went on in the book, which is a good trip. It's a good trip report.
Andrew says, "Yeah, I can hardly wait for my chance to do Extended-State DMT." Likewise. For clarity, are we supposed to submit our body scan assignments or keep them as a reference for ourselves?
I'd love to hear about your experience. It's not, you don't have to send me your worksheet or anything like that. But if you want, again, my request is you keep it manageable for me, so I can read them all. And if you can get it to me, with a little time to read it before the next session, it'd be great. And I'll provide feedback, or we'll, really explore it. And particularly if there's any concerns, misunderstandings, critiques, I want to hear what you disagree with too. So, but yeah, all the homework is optional, but it's again an opportunity for us to connect. So.
Sweet. And then, to follow up on Jason's question, what about the bond between psychonauts? In the training months, any plans for doing things together amongst the psychonauts that may put them through somewhat rigorous experiences together to help create a bond? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so this is kind of one of those questions of like, if we're going purely scientific, maybe we wouldn't want the psychonauts to even talk to each other because it would influence their experiences and things. And we want to balance that out with this is a group process and extremely intense, and, providing peer support for big experiences is going to be really important. So with the DMT Psychonaut Training, the goal, like with the actual retreat, is to put you through intense experiences together with breath work, probably with cannabis too, and push your edges, and that you'll be relying on each other to support each other. And so maybe there will be like a blinded area around the actual expedition experiments, right? So like you wouldn't, like if you were about to go into a DMTX experiment, you might not talk to the person who just went through it, right? And then maybe you wouldn't be integrating with that person right at that time, but they would, the psychonauts would have an integration specialist that they would talk to. And then after maybe a series of everybody going through it, they come back together and compare notes, and we share their experiences. So this is protocol development questions, and this is a question that's beyond just me right now. But that's kind of where I'm thinking if I were to do it all my way. So yeah, maybe one or two more. Is there anything else, or want to honor the time?
There's nothing else that popped in the question and answer box. So
all right. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat, and somebody put the link of the Emerald tablet on there. Really great. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have for tonight. These are full, solid, lots of info. So, and one of the things I'm learning is that it really takes a lot of time to practice these, to develop them. You know, you can't just think about them and do them, but next time you trip, these are concepts that are gonna become like, oh, this is what he's talking about. Oh shit, this is what he's talking about, you know. And so you can develop those qualities, and you want to stabilize them so that when we do something crazy like DMtx, it's natural. It's just the same as seeing, you know, and that you don't have to figure it out at that time. You're just in it, you know. So that's the goal, is to make these processes automatic, you know. So I hope you got a lot out of it. I'm really enjoying this process, and really thankful to Kyle, and also Joe, who's not in here yet, but might be at some point.
Maybe one day, yeah.
Psychedelics Today for helping me with this, you know. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah, thanks so much everybody for showing up and being part of this. It's really great, and hope everybody has a wonderful night and week off.
Yeah, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.